Hello everybody, and welcome back to Anis Vitre. My name is Nimue, and this is a channel about The Witcher books by Andrzej Sapkowski. But today we are going to be talking about Season 4 of The Witcher on Netflix, which claims to be an adaptation of Baptism of Fire, or Chest Ognia, the fifth book in the Witcher series. Now you may ask, if you don't like the Netflix series, why did you watch it? That's a good question, I'll admit. I watched Season 4 on stream, thank you by the way to everyone who turned into that, and I will be releasing edited VODs of that stream on this channel shortly, but I titled that stream Baptism of Fire's Funeral Party for a reason. I watched Season 4 of The Witcher Netflix for a couple of reasons. First of all, when the first season of The Witcher Netflix came out, I felt really hopeless because I was alone when I watched it. I could point out all of the book inaccuracies that I wanted to, but I had nowhere to talk about it. And I imagine that a lot of book fans watching the season felt the same way. So my intention behind streaming the season and watching it and critiquing it was to bring the book community together and lessen the blow. You might say, we are stronger together. The other reason why I watched the season and I'm now giving my commentary on it online is because I feel like I have some valuable insights to give here. Not to hype myself up too much, but I really like Baptism of Fire and I feel like I kind of understand the book, or at least have my own interpretations of the symbolism and messages which it creates for its readers. I don't want to contribute to the waves of hate and aggression online because we already have so much negativity in our lives. But the reason why I'm making this video is because I have heard the claims that Season 4 is an accurate adaptation of Baptism of Fire. And I am here today to say that that in no way is true. Now, if you want to know every single numerical sin that the season committed, as I said, I will be releasing those VODs soon on the channel. But this video is more of a general review and reaction of myself as a books fan and talking about the meaning and message of Baptism of Fire and why Season 4 fails to hit that mark. What I want to talk about today is what makes an adaptation accurate and how paraphrasing a scene is not the same as understanding it. We're going to be talking about broader themes, messages, and characterization rather than running through the list of every single inaccuracy. Because in actuality, while I really did enjoy going on stream and counting 351 book inaccuracies, I actually feel that talking about what the themes are of Baptism of Fire and how Netflix failed to reach those themes is more valuable as a conversation rather than nitpicking the details. However, the details are important as statistical backup. So let's just get started. So in this video, I am primarily going to be talking about the adaptation of the scenes of Geralt's company in Baptism of Fire. I am not really going to be talking about Yennefer's plotline during the season because most of it, if not 99.9% of it, was completely original material by Netflix, and it has no relation or bearing to the plotline of Yennefer from the books. I feel like it's not really even worth discussing that much in this video because it just has nothing to do with the book. Similarly, I really won't be going that much over Ciri's storyline because, well, the problems with it are just so obvious. I think it's easier to just talk about it in the comments of this video and maybe in another video about Ciri and Missile rather than try and put it all into this video. So, Geralt's company. Oh, Geralt's company. Geralt's company, not yet a Hansa because it's not Tower of the Soul Chapter 5 yet when they meet Angoulême, but a company formed by the fish soup by the banks of the Yaruga River. Geralt's company. My fellowship of idiots, my team of heroes, my mind parasites that live in my brain and eat at my every thought. Whatever you want to call them, they are very significant characters to me. My mind parasites. I love them, okay? The name of the game is complexity, developing complexity in your characters. And I knew that Netflix would never do justice by Geralt's company, and this is why. Netflix fears to allow their characters to be complicated individuals who are sometimes wrong, sometimes err, and sometimes, get this, sometimes they do bad things. The whole point of Geralt's company in Baptism of Fire is that they have each sinned, erred, and done wrong. Maybe we should begin by explaining what a Baptism of Fire is, because the Netflix show did not. In times of trouble, Emiel Regis comes to me speaking words of wisdom. Advice is superfluous to you, allies are superfluous, you'll get by without any traveling companions. The goal of your expedition is, after all, personal and private. More than that, the nature of the goal demands that you accomplish it alone. In person. The risks, dangers, hardships, and constant struggle with doubt must only burden you. For, after all, they are components of the penance, the expiation of guilt you want to earn. A baptism of fire, I'd say. You'll pass through fire, which burns but also purges, and you'll do it alone. 4. Were someone to support you in this, help you, take on even a scrap of that baptism of fire, that pain, that penance, they would, by the same token, impoverish you. They would deprive you of part of the expiation you desire, which would be owed to them for their involvement. After all, it should be your exclusive expiation. Only you have a debt to pay off, and you don't want to run up debts with other creditors at the same time. Is my logic correct? Surprisingly so, considering you're sober. Your presence annoys me, vampire. Leave me alone with my expiation, please. And with my debt. As you wish, Regis said, arising. Sit and think. But I will give you some advice anyway. A sense of guilt, as well as the need for expiation, for a cleansing baptism of fire, aren't things you can claim an exclusive right to. Life differs from banking because it has debts which are paid off by running up debts with others. Go away, please. As you wish. It's funny how I started this video all frowny and sad, and as soon as I read from Baptism of Fire, I get a big grin on my face. That's just how it is with me, I suppose. This is what a baptism of fire is. The premise of the book Baptism of Fire is that Geralt has failed in his protection of Ciri. She was lost during the explosion of Torlara during the Tanid coup, and he has lost her again. He does not know where she is. He considers this his failure as a father. The fight with Vilgefortz on Taned leaves him broken, and he heals for a month in the magical forest of Brokilon. Baptism of Fire begins with him leaving Brokilon and embarking on a quest to save Ciri. Seems somewhat similar so far to the Netflix series, right? But here's the thing. They cut out Geralt's entire character conflict in Baptism of Fire. Baptism of Fire is named that because Geralt is looking for expiation for his guilt and sin of failing Ciri as her father. And because he is looking for expiation, he does not want other people to join him in his quest. He wants to be alone because that suffering he doesn't feel right putting onto other innocent people. He won't let innocent people suffer for his personal cause. I might also add that his need for expiation at this point in the book is quite selfish and self-centered, and it's kind of like how, as in A Little Sacrifice, Dandelion calls him out for flaunting his otherness and being obsessed with his own abnormality. Geralt, sensing that he's done wrong by Ciri, focuses on the fact that he's done wrong, and is kind of in a point where he doesn't exactly know what to do to save her. He has no option to actually save her, so he's just wandering around and suffering because Geralt. It's only when his company joins him in Chapter 5 of Baptism of Fire when he actually orients himself and has a concrete goal and destination of which they're journeying to. Before that, he's saying that he's going to go to Nilfgaard to get Ciri, which is just, like, ridiculous, and he acknowledges that it's ridiculous, but he has no other way, no other destination, nothing else to do, so he's just suffering for the sake of suffering because he feels so guilty. And that is Geralt of Rivia, and that's why we all love him. Netflix cut this out, and this is where we get our first problem, which reaches all the way back to Season 1. For some reason, they seem to have flipped and reversed Geralt's character conflict between Season 1 and Season 4, which makes no sense. In Season 4, Geralt's entire character conflict is that he needs to accept his role of a father.
I am a father.
He should have already done that by the end of the short story, Something More, and in the novel Blood of Elves. That's square one. Because in Season 1, his character conflict is that he wants to be alone, is pushing people away, and just wants to remain unbothered by everybody. Now, on the surface, this might seem like what he's doing in Baptism of Fire, but it's really different. Because in Baptism of Fire, Geralt's conflict is not that he wants to be alone for the sake of being alone, or that, for example, in Netflix's version, Jaskier simply annoys him so he doesn't want to be with him. Which, by the way, from the book's perspective, is just the stupidest thing that I've ever heard, because Jaskier and Geralt are established as best friends, close friends, in the very debut of Dandelion's character in The Voice of Reason. But I'm getting ahead of myself because this video isn't about Season 1, even though I have a lot of issues with Season 1. Anyways, Geralt's conflict in Baptism of Fire is that he doesn't want other people to suffer for him. He doesn't want other people to have to take on his Baptism of Fire, his expiation. But Regis's point in the passage which I just read, and which Netflix did not adapt, is that Geralt's inability to accept other people's help in Baptism of Fire will be his doom. He needs to accept their friendship, and he needs to accept their joining him on his quest for expiation, for them also to find their own expiation by helping him. The point of Baptism of Fire, because of this whole character conflict, is that friendship is important not just because, yay, friendship, but because if you don't accept friendship, if you don't accept the people who are trying to help you, then you will doom yourself, and you'll suffer as a consequence. This relates to Ciri's storyline, in which she finds, well, kind of the opposite of Geralt's company, the rats, who, instead of wanting to help her, manipulate, use, and exploit her. Geralt finally accepting his company in Baptism of Fire is a giant leap for his character. As he tells Zoltan later in the book, it's not something he's used to work with a company. Baptism of Fire isn't just about making sacrifices for others, it's about allowing others to make sacrifices for you, which is really important for Geralt's character because, especially if you've read the short story A Shard of Ice, he has trouble believing that anyone would actually love him and that he deserves to have people that love him and sacrifice for him. I mean, the actual larger issue in A Little Sacrifice is that he doesn't believe that he himself is capable of love because Eastred bullied the fuck out of him, but I digress. And as we hear in the short story A Little Sacrifice, he who loves makes sacrifices. So Geralt's company choosing to join him on this quest is not just significant for their characters, it's significant for Geralt, who needs to accept them in his life. Now let's talk about the other half of that, the expiation for the rest of his company. So as I mentioned, they are all seeking expiation for their guilt and their debt. Now, what are these debts? Spoilers for Baptism of Fire. Geralt's debt is that he failed Ciri, and his expiation is to suffer to recover her. Dandelion's debt is that he failed to be by Geralt's side during the Tannid coup, and his expiation is to now join him in his quest. Milva's debt is that she's pregnant and is planning to have an abortion and drop the pregnancy, and her expiation is to save Geralt's daughter, Ciri. A child for a child. Milva also has a complicating factor here, which is that she killed for Brokilon, and so the blood of the men that she killed haunts her and is also part of her debt. Regis's debt is obviously that he spilled human blood. Well, he didn't spill it, he drank it. But actually, you'll find that none of the blood was spilled, it all went into my mouth. Regis's debt is that he spilled human blood and is now trying to conserve it. You might also say that Regis is demonstrating the ultimate humility by laying down his life and dropping everything to help a witcher who is supposed to be his mortal enemy. Cahir's guilt is the most obvious, and that is that he kidnapped Ciri and is now trying to make things right by saving her. But do you see how this works? Every single character in Geralt's company, which does not include Yarpen Zigrin, by the way, who was not even in this book. And also, Zoltan Chive is not part of Geralt's company. He had his own company, which consisted of 4 other dwarves and Percival Schuttenbach. The other 4 dwarves being Caleb, Yazen, Munro, and Figgis, who were not adapted in Season 4, so I guess we can't even talk about them. But Zoltan has his own company, which combines, then parts ways with Geralt's company, and perhaps we'll talk about that later in this video, but it's not really the point that I'm trying to make here. Every single member of Geralt's company has some really bad stuff on their conscience. Even if we personally may not agree with the severity of their debt, for example, I don't believe that Milva should have felt guilt, but she comes, remind you, from a very, very traditional peasant background, and she has a very traditional understanding of what it means to be a woman. No matter what we may feel about their debts, each member of Geralt's company has something really big on their conscience. And that is why they join Geralt, out of the sense of expiation. Fringilla Vigo even lords this over Regis and Cahir's heads later in Lady of the Lake Chapter 4. And this scene is funny because Angoulême is just, well, she's Angoulême. So here's the thing. Netflix did not do any of this. Geralt's company and Netflix just join him for no reason, because they're not seeking a baptism of fire in the adaptation Baptism of Fire. And Geralt doesn't have to learn to accept their company, he just has to learn to accept that he's a father, which he should have already accepted when hugging Ciri and reuniting with her, not meeting her for the first time in Jurga's courtyard. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that Season 4 did not adapt the actual themes and the core message of Baptism of Fire. And because of that, I don't believe that this can be considered a book-accurate adaptation. Now let me talk about complex characters and character flaws. As I just said, each member of Geralt's company has something on their conscience that they're trying to relieve themselves of by joining him and suffering on this quest, suffering collectively as brothers in arms in this shared suffering in this war zone which they are traversing. This is why, and it wasn't in the English translation of The Witcher because, well, copyright issues, but this is why Baptism of Fire begins with the Brothers in Arms song from Dire Straits. Through these fields of destruction, baptisms of fire, I've witnessed your suffering as the battles raged higher. And though they did hurt me so bad, in the fear and alarm, you did not desert me, my brothers in arms. And this song relates to what happens to Milva at the end of the book, which we're getting to. By the way, cover art for the Supernova editions fucking rocks. Look at that Milva right there. Okay, anyways. Also, I do like Alejandro Colucci's because, like, look, she has earrings? That's freaking cool. Also, skies out, thighs out. So anyways, we're talking about character flaws and wrongdoings. And this is maybe one of my biggest issues with the Netflix show, which is completely opposite to the books, to Sapkowski's approach. Sapkowski's characters, specifically his heroes, are very, very human in their writing. And how does he achieve this? Well, Sapkowski's heroes are not perfect people. They don't always make the right decisions. Sometimes they hurt each other, sometimes they do morally wrong things. They're just trying to do the best with the situations that they're given. But despite this, despite the fact that they err, make mistakes, and even hurt others, they try to redeem themselves. They try to make it right. They try to find expiation, to find a baptism of fire. They feel guilt. They feel the need for expiation because they're human, and not only human. This is so much more meaningful than a character who just gets everything right and never does any wrong and never makes any mistakes, because no one does that. Life is complicated. We are always making mistakes, from the moment we are born to the moment we die. I don't believe that anyone can ever truly say that they've never hurt anyone else in their life, or that they've never done something which has accidentally harmed another person. Life is full of mistakes and hurting people, even hurting yourself or ones you love. But the point is, what you have to do to be a hero is to make it right. You have to admit that you've made a mistake and you have to seek out doing right. That's what being a hero is about. It's not about being a perfect person. What I really loathe about season 4 of The Witcher on Netflix is that they forgot, or perhaps intentionally did not adapt, all of the wrongdoing that their heroes committed. They're not seeking an expiation, they're not seeking a baptism of fire, they're just sitting there. When I was watching season 4 of The Witcher on Netflix, I said to myself, this is baptism of fire for people who hate baptism of fire. Because if you don't know, the opinions on Baptism of Fire in the Witcher fandom are somewhat divided. People seem to either love this novel, hi, that's me, or they seem to hate it because the whole novel is basically, on its surface, literally, just Geralt and his company wandering around and getting into situations, but not really ending up somewhere totally different than where they started. They're still in the war zone. They haven't really gone anywhere, except from Brokilon to Angren. But the journey of Baptism of Fire doesn't take place in geographic distance. The journey of Baptism of Fire takes place in its character development. It takes place in the expiation that they achieve together, that their filthy hands as a company wash one another's, that they purify each other through their friendship, and not to mention their quests. Let's start with talking about Emiel Regis. In Baptism of Fire, Regis's backstory is a story about addiction. It's a story, a metaphor about alcoholism. And yet, not just that. Not only that. Because you see, the alcoholism, or the addiction to blood which he had, was not the cause. It was the symptom. The cause of Regis's addiction was that he was terrified of losing social approval. Quote, unquote. And so he drank as to not spoil the party. He was so desperate for social approval from other vampires that he betrayed himself and killed himself in order to achieve it. And it left him no closer to actually ever getting true friendship. But the cause of his demise was not only his addiction. The cause of his demise was selfishness. He was so self-obsessed and so eager to get this approval from others that he forgot about true friendship, about achieving actual connection with others. It is that selfishness which led him to push others away, those who really, actually, sincerely loved him for who he was. Regis, in the books, in his backstory, was offered love. He was offered solace and saving. The message of The Witcher is that love saves. Love delivers us from all types of evils. Love redeems. But in order to embrace this redemption, to embrace love, you have to be someone worth loving, who will reciprocate that love. And love, as we know, demands sacrifice. Regis, in the throes of his addiction, meets a special vampire girl, and he stops going crazy, but not for long, because she leaves him. And here is where Netflix differs from the book, which results in an entirely different message than the book has. In the book, this relationship is not enough to save him. Because, after all, as we might already know, it's not a woman's job to save a man from despair. Female characters don't just exist to save the male ones. We also see this, for example, with Geralt and Yennefer, who have this entire storyline at the beginning of the books in these short stories. Yennefer and Geralt experience the cliché of love at first sight during the short story, The Last Wish. However, by bounds of reason, the next chronological short story, we see that they've fallen out. The message with Geralt and Yennefer, who are both extremely traumatized by their childhoods, each individually, is that love takes work. Something more than destiny is needed. That something more is love. To embrace this love and to be redeemed by it, Geralt and Yennefer don't just fall together and live happily ever after. They have to separate. They have to work on themselves. They have to become people who are ready to love. And Regis, in his backstory, was not that person yet. Regis, when the vampire girl leaves him, is, well, despair and grief, as you know, are the perfect excuses. Everybody thinks they understand. Even I thought I understood. But I was merely applying theory to practice. Regis is consumed by his despair and grief and uses it as an excuse to take his pain out on others, on innocents. Because, as we might imagine, as a vampire drinks, well, let's just say he wasn't throwing back shots of vodka. And finally, as his despair and grief has consumed him, Regis dies of his own self-hatred and loathing, of his own despair and grief, which he took out on others, which he took out on himself. Regis in his backstory didn't care about who he hurt, even himself. And that's why, when he dies, well, for the first time, it's his own fault. He dies out of his own selfishness, because he pushed others away. Because when someone stopped loving him, he used that as an excuse to harm himself and harm others. Regis, in his backstory, in the books, did bad things and was a bad person. You might even say that he wasn't even a person yet, because he was a vampire. But then he dies a vampire, and he comes back as a human. He comes back determined to heal himself, and then takes on the responsibility and the expiation of healing others. Regis atones for his sins, and he does this even furthermore in Baptism of Fire by joining Geralt and his company on the quest for Ciri. And in Netflix, if you haven't seen the season, this is what happens. Instead of dying from his own foolishness and own selfishness, he dies because, well, a random human woman finds him at the bottom of the well in which he was supposed to die and heals him, teaches him herbalism, gives him all of the self-development which he did painstakingly, which he accomplished by himself in the books. In Netflix's version, this human woman heals Regis of everything that he did. And he actually did pretty much nothing wrong. Instead, what happens is that this human woman is kidnapped by other vampires, and then Regis goes and slays the vampires for kidnapping her, and then she dies, and then peasants kill Regis because why not now? So instead of Regis hurting others and then hurting himself so much that he dies, Regis just dies because of vampire battle, I guess. People were saying this is a Castlevania ripoff. I haven't seen Castlevania, so I don't know. But I do know that this is such a robbery of the actual depth and complexity which Regis has in the books. And hearing and seeing people call this adaptation a accurate adaptation to the books is a huge injustice to the character and the moral complexity of The Witcher. I also have to give my 2 cents here, which is that I really appreciate Sapkowski's depiction of addiction as not just hurting others and not just hurting oneself, because I feel like most depictions do either or. Regis in his backstory is depicted as the person, or lack of person, that he was, and the fact that he hurt other people, or hurt other vampires, and also hurt a lot of humans, isn't shied away from. Even though his backstory isn't supposed to be solely tragic and dramatic, because it's also very much laced with dark humor and it's supposed to be comedic, and I do also find some of the things he says quite funny and amusing, I also have to say that this depiction of addiction really helped me cope with everything that happened with my own father, who was an alcoholic. I already talked about that personal story of mine, so I won't get into it in this video, but I do have a quite personal attachment to the character of Emiel Regis because I found this story when I was basically, well, left alone after my dad left me and my mom, and I was trying to find a depiction of addiction and alcoholism that wasn't just so one-sided. So yeah, anyways. So although Netflix acknowledges that blood has a euphoric effect on vampires, the story is not a story about addiction. It's just a random generic vampire story. And that unwillingness to engage with the complexity, the moral complexity of the character, or any of the deeper themes is why this is not a book-accurate adaptation.
While I'm on the subject, may I just please ask, what the fuck was this, too?
I'm a vampire.
Now let's talk about Milva Barring. Let's give a brief summary of Milva's character in Baptism of Fire. As I've talked about duality with Regis's character, as he is both a human and a vampire, Milva also has this time duality, as she is both a woman and a dryad, or at least symbolically a dryad. She is called half-dryad because she works for Brokilon, but she is not actually a dryad as in having taken the waters of Brokilon. She's also called a dryad because she is a ruthless killer. Milva is Red Kite, a bird of prey. Netflix changed her backstory of why she works for Brokilon. Milva kills for Brokilon because she is indebted to Queen Enya because she was caught in one of the Dryad's traps when she was hunting in Brokilon, and Enya didn't have her executed. So now she works for Brokilon, paying off her debt to the Dryads.
However, in Netflix, the situation is greatly simplified, and she kind of just rocks up to Brokilon, kills a few Dryad scalpers, and then they accept her completely.
I did whatever it took to survive on my own, and soon I realized I could do the same for others like me.
The larger issue that I have with these changes to Milva's backstory is that they don't ever question the killing of these people, which I agree. I mean, they are Dryad scalpers, so I'm not saying that she shouldn't have killed them, but, you know, it was killing human beings, you know? The book makes a point of Milva's guilt over killing these men, even if they were evil men, because, I mean, you are killing people. That's what it is.
Now, I mentioned earlier that the characters have debts, no matter if we might agree if they're morally corrupt or not. For Brokilon, Milva killed Dryad scalpers, which are racist humans that go after Dryads and try to exterminate them. So the morality of organizing executions of these Dryad scalpers is ambiguous. But no matter if we agree with the morality of killing Dryad scalpers or not, the point of Milva's character is that she feels immense guilt for this blood that she has spilled. She orchestrated the killing of about 100 men. This paragraph from the book, which Netflix did not adapt, explains her duality as a character. I'm Maria, not Milva. What kind of a red kite am I? A mother hen with an egg, not a kite. Milva laughed with the Dryads in the battleground, pulled arrows from bloodied corpses, wasted a good arrow shaft or a good arrowhead, and if someone was still breathing, a knife across the throat. Milva was treacherous. She led those people to their fate and laughed. Now their blood calls. That blood, like a wasp's venom, is devouring Maria from the inside. Maria is pain for Milva. Jestem Maria nie Milva. Maria Barring is a peasant girl who was raised in Sodden. As we might imagine from her peasant upbringing, she had very traditional values and ideas of what it meant to be a woman, and the mores which come with womanhood. Symbolically and traditionally, a woman is a nurturer, a giver of life. Milva is the opposite of that. She's a killer, a destroyer of life. So when she becomes pregnant, that is an inherent irony in her character, and it causes her great conflict. When Milva talks about her pregnancy in Baptism of Fire, she's ashamed. She's afraid. Unlike Milva, the killer from Brokilon, Maria, the peasant girl, is afraid. And she's not only afraid and embarrassed of pregnancy, but also of what she's planning: abortion. Now, abortion is a very hot political topic, and this video will not cover all of the nuances around it. But let's just say that Sapkowski's stance here was extremely progressive for the time, and still to this day remains progressive. This scene seems to confuse a lot of people, so let me just explain. In the book, Milva is extremely self-conscious about her pregnancy, and does not, like Netflix, just announce it to the company. She chooses to confide in the vampire, and also surgeon, Regis. She entrusts him with her medical situation. And it is Regis who leads a discussion amongst the men in the company about abortion. And in this discussion, they all adamantly and unanimously agree that the choice of abortion is a woman's right. However, and this is where the nuance comes in, is that the question here is not about whether abortion is a human right or not. It is. That's already settled. The question here is if Milva wants the abortion or not. If she actually wants to have it, or is feeling pressured to have it because she feels indebted to Geralt and feels a moral guilt for having an abortion. The point of Milva's pregnancy and abortion in the book is that it should be her exclusive choice without the social pressures, and that those social pressures are extremely difficult to rid oneself of. This is why in the book, Regis tells Geralt, no, demands Geralt to talk to her, to let her know that it's okay. And Geralt is terrified. He doesn't want to have this highly emotional, intimate, vulnerable conversation with Milva. She's his friend. He respects her. And this is just so much. But he does it anyways because they are friends. In Netflix, they just have this conversation. It's not really a question whether they're going to have the conversation or not. And Milva barely even is embarrassed or afraid of her situation at all. She's not emotionally vulnerable. You might say that they attempted emotional vulnerability with this scene, but they did the classic Netflix Witcher thing of interrupting it with jokes.
Fucking destiny.
Fucking destiny.
There is not a single joke in the book scene between Geralt and Milva because it's a serious conversation. And the worst and most disrespectful part of Milva's character is that Netflix changed her backstory to make the sexual experience she has, which leaves her pregnant, into a wholly consensual one.
They willfully lived in the present. I finally understood what their fervor was really about. Connection. Their search for joy. To forget their circumstances.
Whereas in the books, it was an experience which she was not ready for, which filled her with fear. I was guiding a commander to Brokilon, she said softly. It was in Burnt Stump, in June, on the Sunday before summer solstice. We were chased, there was a fight. 7 of us escaped on horseback. 5 elves, 1 she-elf, and me. About half a mile to the ribbon, but the cavalry were behind us and in front of us, darkness all around, swamps, bogs. At night we hid in the willows. We had to let ourselves and the horses rest. Then the she-elf undressed without a word, lay down, and the first elf lay with her. It froze me. I didn't know what to do. Move away or pretend I couldn't see? The blood was pounding in my temples, but I heard it when she said, "Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Who will cross the ribbon and who will perish? En camine, a little love. Only this way," she said, "can death be overcome. Death or fear." They were afraid. She was afraid. I was afraid. So I undressed too and lay down nearby. I placed a blanket under my back. When the first one embraced me, I clenched my teeth, for I wasn't ready. I was terrified and dry. But he was wise, an elf after all. He only seemed young, wise, tender. He smelled of moss, grass, and dew. I held my arms out towards the second one myself, desiring a little love. The devil only knows how much love there was in it and how much fear, but I'm certain there was more fear. For the love was fake, perhaps well faked, but fake even so, like a pantomime, where if the actors are skilled, you soon forget what's play acting and what's the truth. But there was fear. There was real fear. I'm sorry, it's gotten really dark in here. I'll turn on the light. That daylight savings time, am I right? Although I'm not a survivor of sexual assault or traumatic sexual experiences myself, I felt like this was a nuanced depiction of such a topic. As Regis says, sex is beautiful, but I'm just saying that there are a lot of gray areas which can leave people feeling regretful, ashamed, uncomfortable, embarrassed, and this is part of the human experience. And that's why I feel like Netflix's depiction of this, to make it just a super happy consensual orgy, is a huge disrespect to the nuance depicted in Milva's story. I also wasn't going to talk too much about Yennefer's character in this video, but I feel like it's necessary as we're talking about this moral complexity, as this being a hero and doing the right thing in the end. In Baptism of Fire, it's revealed that Yennefer was involved in the pairing of royal couples to alter the genetic flow of the Elder Blood gene, of the Lara Doran gene. And this messing around with genetics was what led to Ciri's birth. The sorcerers paired royals up together and basically tried to control where the gene was ending up, but the experiment got out of hand and they abandoned it. Yennefer in Baptism of Fire regrets this. Yennefer in the books refuses to join the Lodge of Sorceresses because the Lodge is a political cabal created to control magic and the future of magic, which they will do by any means that they have. And those means include capturing Ciri and using her as a political pawn, marrying her off to a Cahirian prince, and controlling her as the queen of Cahir, and then soon as the queen of the entire world. The Lodge of Sorceresses wants to use Ciri for her power. Yennefer doesn't stand by this. Yennefer is Ciri's mother. Yennefer will not stand idly by Ciri being exploited. Yennefer escapes from Monte Calvo. She escapes from the capturing of the Lodge. Thank you, Fringilla Vigo, for the tip about the oysters. But the point I'd like to make relating back to what I was saying about Regis, Milva, and Geralt is that she has erred and done wrong, and what she does in the moment is to make it right. However, in the Netflix show, she's just right all the time, and everyone accepts her as the supreme leader of the Lodge, which, might I add, in Netflix, comes together as this sort of like, girl power, let's all go save Ciri, hurrah! When in the books, it was woman versus woman. There was no allyship here. In my experiences, friendship isn't just gained because you share a gender. Friendship comes from something more, from having shared interests, from being just good people together. What I really hate about all of the sorceresses in The Witcher Netflix is that they just kind of exist together as friends, but we're not really ever given a reason for why they're friends. In the books, the Lodge are highly intelligent, competent women with years of studying and degrees that affect their understanding of magic and are why they want to protect the future of it. Margarita is literally the rectoress of Aretuza. Esiriva Anahid is a scholar, same with Sheila de Tankerville. And let's not forget all of Philippa Eilhart's political scheming. Netflix making all of the sorceresses in this show basically defined by their emotionality, by their weird sex. I don't know why they added this part, is just so, like, it's just such a disservice to the intelligent and strong women that they are in the books. And it feels like they're afraid to depict female characters as ruthless, as political, as logical. They have to be emotional and friends and, ooh, let's just, like, hold a little kumbaya session. The Lodge of Sorceresses in the Netflix show does not feel at 1 ounce political. They just exist as like a group of friends, which is because the whole Netflix show is not really political at all, but whatever. Basically what I talked about on stream in this part was that the Lodge of Sorceresses were not necessarily friends. They were a political alliance. And this is even shown in the cruelty that they demonstrate to each other with, well, when Esiriva Anahid joins the Lodge in Chapter 1 of Baptism of Fire. In the Netflix show, they just made Ciri like kind of quirky and just like, ooh, I'm weird little witch. But in the books, when she appears, the other sorceresses bully her because she doesn't conform to their standards of femininity. Because Nilfgaardian sorceresses who attend the Imperial Court are restricted in the cosmetics and in the fashions they can consume, Esiriva Anahid's appearance is more natural than the sorceresses who are from the north. She has a poor complexion, she doesn't wear makeup, and she doesn't wear fashionable clothes. Unlike the northern sorceresses who are dressed extravagantly, Esiriva Anahid just wears some baggy black robes and a conical hat. And the others don't treat her with much grace for this. Triss Merigold literally thinks to herself and literally calls Esiriva Anahid in her mind a black rat. Yes, that Triss, the nice, little, cutesy tris. The Lodge of Sorceresses in the books is not a depiction of female friendship and solidarity. The Lodge of Sorceresses is a depiction of ruthless political allegiance.
I'm not saying that they didn't have friendships on the side, like Fringilla and Isire were good friends, but as a whole group, they're not working together because they're friends. They're working together because they have the same political interest to control magic on the continent.
It feels so uncomfortable that Netflix is unable to engage with the politics of the continent. I mean, just in general, but especially for how the Lodge was treated in this season. And especially because Yennefer founds the Lodge, which in the books, as I already mentioned, she escaped from the Lodge. She wanted nothing to do with the Lodge. And she was freaking kidnapped by the Lodge. Okay, this is why I didn't want to talk about Yennefer's storyline too much, because it basically has no relation to the books. But I felt it necessary because we were talking about moral complexity. No, actually, I have another bone to pick with Netflix right now. This is about the trial scene with the horseshoe, which Netflix cut out some really important context about this scene, which I feel is imperative to share. As I already mentioned in my previous video, Fencarn is not haunted by a wraith. The whole point of Fencarn is that there are no monsters in Fencarn, and they only ever find a polite, middle-aged man in there, who happens to be a vampire. But, as I said, there are no monsters in Fencarn, because Regis is not a monster. However, that doesn't stop peasants from assuming that he is. In Baptism of Fire, the context of Fencarn comes in with the peasants believing that there is a vampire living in Fencarn. And kinda?
I'm a vampire.
I mean, he doesn't live in the burial ground, he has a cottage nearby. Which, by the way, was turned into a freaking manor in Netflix, because we can't just show like a nice little fairy tale Slavic hut right here. It has to be a giant manor. The context for why the peasants fear this alleged vampire is because a woman and child were recently slaughtered nearby. And the blame for these brutal murders falls on the vampire. The vampire which no one has seen and heard, but which a priest in the refugee camp has blamed for every human ill. Because the vampire which they seek is not Regis. It is a symbolic vampire. It is the scapegoat for all of their misfortunes. A vampire must be evil because he is a vampire. However, Baptism of Fire spins this on its head. So Regis, as this vampire suffering a false accusation, colors the entire scene with the horseshoe, with the trial of the accused girl. Because as they go to the refugee camp, they see the priest accusing a random girl of being a witch, who is also accused of cavorting with said vampire. The girl, who is developmentally disabled, potentially profoundly autistic, cannot advocate for herself. And moreover, she has no family to protect her. She's an innocent and will die without their intervention. And Regis saves her with the horseshoe. When the priest offers the concept of a trial by ordeal, Geralt accepts it. Geralt offers himself up to the trial by combat. So does Milva, and so does Zoltan. But the trial which the priest demands of them is altogether different. The trial is to pull a red-hot horseshoe from the fire. Regis, who is secretly a vampire, unmasks himself by doing this by sacrificing his safety to pull the horseshoe. And he declares the girl's innocence, but not only hers. Regis walks over to Geralt, Milva, and Zoltan and puts a hand on Zoltan's shoulder. "One moment, please. Please withhold your prayers." The barber surgeon walked over to the fire, bowed to the priest in the audience, then stooped rapidly and put his hand into the hot coals. The crowd screamed as one. Zoltan cursed, and Milva dug her fingers into Geralt's arm. Regis straightened up, calmly looked down at the white-hot horseshoe he was holding, and walked unhurriedly over to the priest. The priest took a step back, bumping into the peasants standing behind him. "This was the idea, if I'm not mistaken, your reverence," Regis said, holding up the horseshoe. "Baptism of fire? If so, I believe the divine judgment is unambiguous. The girl is innocent. Her defenders are innocent. And I, just imagine, am also innocent." I've seen people calling this scene book accurate for this reason, because they did adapt some of the dialogue from this scene. However, they cut the entire context of the vampire also being accused along with the girl. When Regis saves the girl, when he declares her innocence, he is also saving himself. He is declaring his own innocence because he was also falsely accused.
They also cut the entire scene of Regis later healing the girl from the camp, which begs the question, why even introduce her in the first place if she's not going to show up later? And if you're not going to even establish Regis as a barber surgeon and why he is a barber surgeon and his feelings about barber surgery, I don't know. None of this has any point. It's all just pointless. Oh my god.
In Season 4, it feels like things just happen randomly. They just occur randomly. But in Baptism of Fire, there's a deeper reason for why all these things are happening. There's themes and messages that link everything together. The scene in Season 4 might have paraphrased from the books, it might have even directly quoted a few lines of dialogue, but it didn't engage with any of the deeper meaning and message of the scene. In Season 4, the focus of the scene is on Geralt versus the priest, which is not the point of the scene in the books. The point in the books is about scapegoating. It's about how innocent people suffer. It's about false accusations. And these false accusations are a continued theme in Tower of the Swallow Chapter 5 when Geralt speaks with Folcal Artevelde. And I know that people will say, oh, but they did the lines. They did the lines. They actually said the thing. And it's like, you said the thing, but did you feel the thing? Did you understand the thing? Did you understand what the book is saying? And there is an even worse offending scene in this season that does not do the lines from the book and also refuses to engage with any of the deeper meaning here. I am talking about none other than the scene on the barge and the bridge. In the books, this scene is action-packed and terrifying. All of the characters are extremely vulnerable and all of them are in danger. In Netflix, this is turned into something like a superhero flick. This scene in the book is laced with fear and moral conflict. There is terror and desperation in Milva as she begins to miscarry, and in Regis as he goes to help her. Geralt and Cahir indeed hold the bridge valiantly, but that's not the point. Cahir leaps into action, holding the Lyrian Rivian soldiers' flight from the Nilfgaardian troops attacking. He rallies them and stops them from fleeing, but he's not eager for blood. He doesn't want to start killing. And a question about nationalism and about national and ethnic identity is raised. Cahir cursed in Nilfgaardian, but no one apart from the Witcher paid any attention to it. What has been started must be finished, Geralt snapped, gripping his sword tightly. Let's get them. We have to spur our men into action. Geralt, Cahir said, stopping and looking at him uncertainly. Do you want me to kill my own? I can't. I shit on this war, the Witcher said, grinding his teeth. This is about Milva. You joined the company, so make a choice. Follow me or join the Blacks. But do it quickly. I'm coming with you. And so it was that a Witcher and a Nilfgaardian roared savagely, whirled their swords, and leapt forward together without a second thought. Two brothers in arms, two allies and comrades, in an encounter with their common foe in an uneven battle. And that was their baptism of fire. A baptism of shared fighting, fury, madness, and death. They were going to their deaths, the two of them, or so they thought, for they could not know that they would not die on that day, on the bridge over the river Uruga. They did not know that they were both destined for other deaths, in other places and times. When Cahir fights on the bridge, he makes a sacrifice. He makes a choice. In the books, it's not just presented as, oh, I stopped working for Nilfgaard, so I'm just going to start slaying and killing Nilfgaardians without a second thought. Cahir, as we all know, is from Vicovaro, which is part of the Nilfgaardian Empire. Cahir, in this situation, has to choose between country and friendship, between nationality and love. Yes, friendship is love, by the way. And he chooses love. He chooses to sacrifice for Milva. This book is not about just fighting for the sake of fighting. And it's not even just about friendship for the sake of friendship. It's about friendship despite it all. It's about questions of ethics, politics, nationality. Cahir is a young man. He's uncertain, and he's been groomed for his entire life to be a perfect Nilfgaardian soldier, to fight against the North, who slayed his brother in combat. The Netflix show changed his backstory into something so stupid I won't even mention it, but I think it's also relevant to mention that they depicted this grooming of him as a soldier to be a sort of failed instead of actually taking place. To be something that was forced on him by his father, which, by the way, stop with the Killock slander. Killock was a good father, okay? Instead of something which he, as an impressionable child, fell into. Netflix got a lot of details from this scene very incorrect in this series, and you'll know what I mean if you've watched it, but Also, as much as I had nitpicks about this scene and following the action between the Lyrian Rivians and the Nilfgaardians, their inability to connect with the deeper themes here is the worst part. And I hate how Geralt in this show is depicted as a Superman without any weaknesses. Because the whole point of Geralt's character in the books is that he becomes vulnerable, and it's quote-unquote not easy being Superman. He's a super człowiek who suffers for it. And just because he has superhuman abilities as a Witcher doesn't mean that he's an expert at every kind of fighting that he does. A huge part of Geralt's character in this scene is that he's also afraid because he doesn't know what he's doing. For Geralt, it was something he did not know, a completely new kind of fighting. Swordsmanship was out of the question. It was simply a chaotic melee, a ceaseless parrying of blows falling from every direction. It was becoming more and more cramped. The Witcher and his army found themselves fighting shoulder to shoulder with the bloody and exhausted handful of soldiers, mainly dwarven mercenaries, defending the barricade. They fought, surrounded on all sides. And then came fire. One side of the barricade, located between the timber port and the bridge, had been a huge pile of pine branches, as spiky as a hedgehog, an unsurmountable obstacle to horses and infantry. Now that pile was on fire. Someone had thrown a burning brand into it. Geralt puts out the fire with the Ard sign, and Cahir rallies the troops, running them through the gap. "Follow me!" he roared, slashing an Nilfgaardian's temple when the man was trying to push his way onto the barricade. "Follow me! Through the fire!" And so they set off, scattering the still burning pyre with their spears, throwing the flaming brands they had picked up with their bare hands at the Nilfgaardian horses. A baptism of fire, the Witcher thought, furiously striking and parrying blows. I was meant to pass through fire for Ciri, and I'm passing through fire in a battle which is of no interest to me at all, which I don't understand in any way. The fire that was meant to purify me is just scorching my hair and face. Geralt's uncertainty and his vulnerability in this book is tantamount to its message. And what I really find curious, interesting, and quite funny, sarcasm, is that Lauren Hissrich was actually informed in Twitter in 2020 that Geralt is in fact disabled in the books. Despite reading these books a dozen times, she just plumb never understood that part. Wow! And it was during that Twitter exchange 5 years ago that she accepted that part of Geralt's character and promised to incorporate it in the Netflix series. In the Netflix series, Geralt's knee pain doesn't even come from Vilgefortz's injury of him and Geralt's chronic pain after that. It comes from a random wraith that was hanging out in Fenkarn. The wound troubles him for a couple of episodes and then just stops being relevant altogether. In episode 4, which is supposed to be the adaptation of the trial of the Horseshoe scene, he literally runs and bounds after the girl from the camp. After her sister, because they added a sister for her. I don't know why. They changed the girl that sits on Milva's saddle to be the girl from the camp's sister. I don't know, to add emotional stakes. It's not relevant anyways. But in this scene, he was actually, in the books, supposed to have his chronic pain flare up and immobilize him completely. He falls during the invasion of the refugee camp. He falls in the stampede. The reason why him and Dandelion are captured together by the Temerian, not the Redanian, the Temerian, and Cintrian partisans is because Dandelion wouldn't leave his side when he was clutching his knee in agony and pain. I find it so funny how Netflix is advertising and shilling this show as, "We finally accepted Geralt's emotionality. This is our most emotional Geralt yet," when they absolutely refuse to engage with any of his character development or changes during this book. And where I'll leave it off here today is returning to Geralt and his company. As I began this video with, Geralt's conflict in Baptism of Fire is about accepting a company and accepting the friendship which he needs to go on this quest. In Baptism of Fire, Geralt has this arc, from not accepting the company to accepting the company. But that's not the only thing which changes about him. Also, something that I really dislike about the Netflix adaptation of this book is that they cut out so much of the dialogue. And this is nothing new for Netflix. Nihil novi, nothing new. But it's just excruciating to know that they had so much interaction and private conversations in the books, and they just don't have any of this in the show. It's especially annoying because Geralt and Regis had a lot of private conversations and asides in the book where Geralt started to accept Regis's advice. relating back to his character arc about accepting friendship and accepting his team of heroes, and also related to Geralt and Regis's relationship development across the saga. But these scenes held so much emotionality and depiction of Geralt's character changing throughout the book. After Geralt learns that Milva is pregnant, he is unwilling to risk her safety to get to Ciri quicker. "We have to make it to the Druids in Cahir. I understood it was urgent, that it was important for you to acquire the information and set off to rescue your Ciri as quickly as possible." "It is," Geralt said, looking away. "It's very important to me. I want to rescue Ciri and get her back. Until recently, I thought I'd do it at any price. But no, I won't pay that price. I won't consent to taking that risk. We won't go through Isgit. The alternative? The far bank of the Yaruga. We'll go upstream, far beyond the swamps, and we'll cross the Yaruga again, near Cahir. If it turns out to be difficult, only 2 of us will meet the Druids. I'll swim across and you'll fly over as a bat." "Why are you staring at me like that? I mean, rivers being obstacles to vampires is another myth and superstition. Or perhaps I'm wrong." "No, you are not wrong. But I can only fly during a full moon, not at any other time. That's only 2 weeks away. When we reach the right place, it'll almost be full moon." "Geralt," the vampire said, still not taking his eyes away from the Witcher. "You're a strange man. To make myself clear, I wasn't being critical." "Right then. We give up on Isgit, which is dangerous for a woman with child. We cross to the far bank of the Yaruga, which you consider safer. I'm capable of assessing the level of risk. I don't doubt it." So the whole character arc for Geralt in Baptism of Fire is about accepting this company which he originally shunned. And not only that, but protecting them, caring about them, much like he cares about Yennefer and Ciri. He's not willing to sacrifice his company. He's not willing to spill blood, exchange blood for other blood. And this is the most tragic element of the Witcher saga. At least it is for me, because we know what happens to Geralt and his company, to his Hansa. This sacrifice, which he refuses to make, ends up being made anyways, because he does it unwittingly, unwillingly. It's out of his control. It's destiny. It's the author's pen or keyboard. Even as a hero, he cannot protect his company, no matter how much he wants to. No matter how much he's changed and accepted that as his responsibility as their leader. They end up dying and suffering because of him and his quest. They sacrifice themselves for his quest. They undergo their baptism of fire, but it destroys them. The fire consumes them. They absolve themselves of their sins, but they are no more. Their redemption lies in death and suffering and blood. So what I need to point out here is that Netflix not adapting Geralt's character arc in Baptism of Fire, not adapting the fact that he first shunned his company and wanted to go alone, and that only through character development he finally accepted their help and accepted them as a team of heroes on a shared quest. That removes the entire point of the company even existing in the first place. The point of them existing is the tragedy which befalls them. Towards the end of the season, Netflix begins to try and sell us on this crazy little fun, quirky friendship that all of Geralt's company has, but nothing actually ties them together. There is no shared sacrifice. There's only this like, rah, superhero fight, ah, so epic, so action. We accomplished fantasy. We won the genre. It's commercialized, it's consumable, and it says nothing about humanity or any deeper themes about the human condition. This lack of humanity, this lack of sensitivity, this lack of vulnerability is what makes the Netflix series a failure of an adaptation. It's about a refusal to engage with any of what The Witcher is actually saying, and it's a misrepresentation of what The Witcher is. It's especially frustrating to me because although I love the games also kind of changed the international perception of The Witcher, or might I just say, the US perception of The Witcher, to the point where it seems like most people believe that it's just a video game that's like about killing monsters and that's it. Where the whole point is that it's not about killing monsters, it's about family. It's about sacrifice, it's about tragedy, it's about war, it's about loss, it's about trauma. And that's only the half of it. And the Netflix series just does this on steroids, where it's just like nothing really matters here, things just happen for pure entertainment. So people calling this a book-accurate adaptation is just like so far off the mark for me, and I have to disagree with that. Netflix did paraphrase some scenes, but in addition to not understanding the deeper context and themes underneath them, they also added a bunch of random bullshit which completely ruins any kind of message that they could have even approached in the first place. It's gross, it's disgusting, it's defiling, it's disrespectful, and it's not a book-accurate adaptation. I'm sorry if this video was kind of rant, but I wanted to just bring up my main issues with this season because it will take me a while to edit the VOD. There's a lot of pauses and there's a lot of, me watching it, and there's a lot of side chatter and fun discussions that we had on stream on the side as well, which aren't totally relevant to critiquing Netflix. I may continue to talk about the show on the channel a little bit. The Netflix videos probably, maybe hopefully will die down. I will post the VODs from the stream, but after that, I do want to focus on the video essays because it's kind of annoying me that I haven't been able to get around to them. So anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Anis Vitre. Take care.